Welcome, aspirants. Today we're diving into a really hot topic, one that's absolutely crucial for your GS Paper 2. We're talking about the new geopolitics of the moon. You see, as humanity gets ready to go back, a new kind of race is heating up. And this time, it's not just about exploration. It's about control, and it's about resources. So let's break this down from a pure examination point of view.
So really, the entire debate comes down to this one big question. For a long, long time, the unwritten rule was that space belongs to everyone. It's a global commons, a term you should definitely know. But that's changing. Now, there's this huge push to commercialize it, to mine it, to profit from it. And that completely challenges the old idea. This clash of ideologies, this is the central conflict you'll need to explain clearly in your mains answers.
That's absolutely right. And, driving this new commercial push right at the center of it is a framework put forward by the United States. So to really get a grip on this topic, the first thing we need to do is understand what exactly are these Artemis Accords.
All right, let's get into the details. So on the surface, the Artemis Accords are basically a set of principles for space exploration. Simple enough, right? But here's the catch, and this is the most important part for you to note. These are not some big international treaty worked out at the UN. No. Instead, they're a collection of one-on-one bilateral agreements between the US and other countries. And believe me, this difference in structure, well, it has huge geopolitical consequences, and that's the core of your analysis right there.
Okay, now let's look at the parts that are causing all the debate. First, the Accords are very clear. They say nations and private companies have the right to mine the moon and use its resources. Big statement. Second, they talk about creating safety zones. Now on paper, that sounds perfectly fine, right? To avoid accidents. But the critics, they see something else. They worry that these zones could become, in effect, keep-out signs around valuable areas. It's almost like a sneaky way to claim a piece of the moon without actually saying you're claiming territory, which would violate the old Outer Space Treaty. And another key thing to remember is that this whole framework is built on a 2015 American law, so it's basically the US trying to make its own domestic rule and international standard.
And this is where we get to the heart of the matter for your exam. You have to start thinking critically here. Ask the question, what's the real intention behind this? Is this genuinely about cooperation, or is it more of a one-sided, unilateral move by one powerful country to write the rules for everyone else? Let's dig into the criticisms.
Yeah, and if you look at the analysis, the argument is that these accords aren't happening in a vacuum. They fit into a larger pattern of U.S. foreign policy, a policy some describe as unmitigated self-interest. Think about it. We've seen something similar with the World Trade Organization, right? Where the U.S. effectively crippled the WTO's top court by just blocking new judges. So the point here is there's a pattern of sidestepping or weakening international bodies when they don't serve immediate U.S. interests. This is a very strong point you can use in your critique.
Exactly. And this quote from the legal expert Christopher Newman just hits the nail on the head. He calls the Accords a mechanism for the U.S. to force other countries to accept its interpretation of resource rights. So in simple terms, the accusation is that the U.S. is using its influence to get other countries to agree to its rules, one by one. And if enough countries sign up, poof, you have a new international standard, a de facto one, that was never actually debated or negotiated by everyone at the UN.
So what's the big deal? Well, the institutional damage is the main concern. For more than half a century, there has been one place and one place only for making space law, the UN's Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. You'll see it as COPEUS. It was the forum. But now, by creating this separate parallel track led by the US, the Artemis Accords are basically creating a competing system. And the big risk here is that it could split the world into different camps and seriously weaken the UN's authority in space.
Okay, so if the Artemis Accords are seen as this one-sided path, what's the other option? What's the alternative? Well, the analysis points back towards multilateralism, back to working together. Let's take a look at what that actually means.
This comparison here is really useful. It lays it all out. On one side, you've got the Artemis Accords. Think of it as a club model, led by the US, based on individual deals, and it allows countries to take resources for themselves. On the other side, you have the classic multilateral model, like the 1979 Moon Agreement. That's a proper international treaty. It says the moon's resources are the common heritage of mankind, everyone's property, and everything should be governed through the UN. It's a much more democratic vision. But, and this is a big but, the Moon Agreement was never ratified by the big players like the US, so it never really took off. That's a crucial weakness you have to mention.
So, where do we go from here? The clear suggestion from this analysis is that we need to breathe new life into that multilateral process. The idea is to go back to the drawing board and create proper, treaty-based rules. Maybe we can update old frameworks like that 1979 Moon Agreement to make them more practical for today. The key goal, really, is to build a system where every nation, big or small, developed or developing, feels like they have a real stake in what happens on the moon.
Okay, now for the most important part for all of you. Let's tie all of this directly back to your syllabus, because believe me, this isn't just some interesting trivia about space. This topic has direct, practical applications for your GS Paper 2 answers, and it could very well come up in your interview.
Right. So look closely here. We've mapped it out for you. When you write about important international institutions, you can talk about the challenges facing the UN's COPIOS. Perfect. Contemporary example. When the topic is bilateral and global groupings, you can break down the Artemis Accords as a new kind of US-led bloc. And of course, the big one, effective policies of developed countries. Here you can launch into a full critical analysis of how US space policy is trying to rewrite the rules of the game and what does all this mean for India's own interests.
And thinking about your interview, you absolutely need to have a thought-out, balanced opinion on these types of questions. India's position is fascinatingly complex, isn't it? We've signed the Accords, but we've always been a strong voice for multilateralism. So how do we walk this tightrope? How does India balance its strategic partnership with a country like the US while also championing a global rules-based order? That right there is the core dilemma for Indian foreign policy on this issue.
So to help you put all this together, we have a practice question for you, just like you'd see in the mains. A strong answer here would need 3 parts. First, explain what the Accords are. Second, provide that critical analysis. Talk about the unilateral aspect and the impact on the UN. And third, and most importantly, suggest a well-reasoned, balanced strategic approach for India. Please, do take some time to frame an answer for this. It's excellent practice. Thank you, and all the best.